The numbers just came in, and they are bigger than almost anyone expected. The Pacific Ocean is warming faster than the official forecast called for, and the agency that tracks El Nino now puts the odds of a full event at 82%, with some forecast models pushing that number close to certainty. At the same time, the Storm Prediction Center has placed millions of people under an enhanced risk of severe weather for Thursday, with strong tornadoes, hail larger than 2 inches in diameter, and wind gusts over 75 miles per hour all on the table. And down in the tropics, the National Hurricane Center has just outlined its first area of interest of the entire Atlantic season, sitting right in the southern Gulf of America. In this video, I am breaking down the severe weather threat, the full 7-day setup, the El Nino surge in the Pacific, and what all of it means for the summer ahead. I am Arthur, and this is Sky Space Lab, where we track the data behind America's weather every single day. Before we dive in, if you want forecasts built on actual model runs and official government data instead of hype, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. It is free, it takes a moment, and it makes sure you never miss an update when the pattern is moving as fast as it is moving right now. And believe me, it is moving fast. We have 3 major stories on the board today, and they are all connected by one engine, and that engine is a rapidly strengthening El Nino in the equatorial Pacific. That single ocean signal is reshaping the jet stream above our heads. It is loading the dice for repeated severe weather in the nation's midsection, and at the very same time, it is working to choke off the Atlantic hurricane season before that season can even get started. I will show you exactly how all of those pieces fit together, step by step, using the latest numbers from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Storm Prediction Center, and the National Hurricane Center. Let's get into the data. We start with what is happening right now, today and tomorrow, because this is the part of the forecast with the shortest fuse. Today, Wednesday, June 10th, the severe weather machine is already running across the northern plains and the upper Midwest. The National Weather Service office in Des Moines is highlighting several rounds of severe storms through Thursday, and that phrase, several rounds, is exactly the kind of language that should make you pay attention. This afternoon and evening, thunderstorms are expected to fire across the Dakotas and push east into Minnesota and parts of Iowa. The strongest of these storms will start out as discrete supercells, and in this environment a supercell can produce hail up to 2 inches in diameter, wind gusts in the range of 60 to 70 miles per hour, and an isolated tornado or two before the storms merge into clusters and line segments later in the evening. If you live anywhere from central South Dakota through southern Minnesota and into Iowa, keep a way to receive warnings with you tonight, because some of this activity will roll through after dark and nighttime storms are always the most dangerous kind. Let me know in the comments right now what city you're watching from and whether the sky's already changing where you are, because your reports help everyone else in this community see the storm evolution in real time. Let me give you the timing on today in more detail, because timing is everything with these storms. The first cells should begin firing between 2 and 4 in the afternoon local time across central South Dakota and adjacent parts of North Dakota, in an environment carrying 2,000 to 3,000 joules per kilogram of storm energy, which is more than enough fuel for rotating supercells. Through the early evening, the storms organize and shift east, and between roughly 7 and 10 in the evening, the mode transitions from individual supercells into clusters and line segments, which is when the threat tilts away from hail and tornadoes and towards straight-line wind damage. One or more of those clusters could survive deep into the overnight hours and ride all the way into Minnesota and Iowa before sunrise. If you're in that corridor, charge your phone tonight, make sure emergency alerts are switched on, and do not rely on outdoor sirens to wake you up, because sirens were never designed to be heard indoors over an air conditioner. But here is where the story takes a turn, because today is only the warm-up. Thursday, June 11th is the day the Storm Prediction Center is most concerned about. The latest Day 2 convective outlook, issued early this morning from Norman, Oklahoma, places an enhanced risk, that is level 3 out of 5, across a corridor stretching from the lower Missouri Valley and the mid-Mississippi Valley into the upper Great Lakes. Read that map with me, because the wording in the official forecast discussion is unusually strong. The Storm Prediction Center is calling for scattered to numerous severe storms capable of potentially strong tornadoes, large hail greater than 2 inches in diameter, and destructive wind gusts in excess of 75 miles per hour. Those are not throwaway words. When the forecasters in Norman put destructive winds and strong tornadoes in the same sentence, that is not language they use casually. Here is who needs to watch this the most. The corridor of greatest concern runs from northern Missouri and central and eastern Iowa, including Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, through the Quad Cities, into southwestern and central Wisconsin, including La Crosse and Madison, and on toward Green Bay and the upper Great Lakes. Eastern Nebraska, far southeastern Minnesota, and northern Illinois sit on the edges of this threat as well, and a broader slight risk wraps all the way from the southern plains into the upper Great Lakes. The mechanism is a potent shortwave trough that starts Thursday morning over the central high plains and then accelerates northeast through the day, throwing strong wind energy over an air mass loaded with surface dew points in the 60s to low 70s. Storms should erupt by mid-afternoon, reach peak intensity through the evening, and then consolidate into one or more powerful wind-producing lines as they race toward Lake Michigan. And there is a second piece to Thursday that is getting far less attention. The same overall pattern supports widely scattered severe storms across the mid-Atlantic and the central Appalachians, so parts of Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia also need to stay alert for damaging winds and hail Thursday afternoon. So what does this actually mean for your area? If you are anywhere inside that enhanced risk corridor, take 10 minutes today to think through where you would shelter from a tornado warning and how you would get a warning if it arrives at night. That small step is the entire difference on days like Thursday. Now let's walk through the next 7 days, one day at a time, because this pattern does something very specific, and once you see it, you will understand where the rest of June is heading. Friday, June 12th. The energy that drives Thursday's outbreak threat slides east. The Storm Prediction Center's extended outlooks have been consistently advertising a shortwave trough and a 50-knot jet streak racing from the Ohio Valley toward the St. Lawrence Valley, with a cold front sweeping southeast underneath it. Ahead of that front, dew points in the 60s to low and even mid-70s combine with steep mid-level lapse rates to build a moderately unstable air mass across the lower Great Lakes by Friday afternoon. That points toward a wind damage threat for parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania and New York, with embedded spin-up tornadoes possible along the stronger line segments. If you are in the lower Great Lakes or the interior northeast, Friday is your day to stay close to the radar. Have you been getting more storms than usual where you live this month or fewer? Drop your answer in the comments with your state, because I am tracking how this pattern is being felt on the ground from coast to coast. Saturday, June 13th, the front presses toward the east coast and the deep south. The severe threat ramps down a notch, but showers and thunderstorms ride along and ahead of the boundary, from the Carolinas down through Georgia, while the northern plains catch their breath under quieter, drier air. Down south, the story flips from wind shear to water, because tropical moisture begins streaming north out of the Bay of Campeche region toward the western Gulf Coast, and I will have much more on the source of that moisture in just a few minutes. Sunday, June 14th. Watch the western half of the country. The upper-level ridge begins to rebuild over the west, and the latest guidance from both the American and European modelling systems shows heat expanding across the interior southwest and the high plains, with temperatures climbing several degrees above normal for mid-June. Updated guidance just this morning keeps that warming trend fully on track. And it is not just the thermometer. As the flow turns more southerly over the weekend and into next week, dew points climb back through the 60s and toward the 70s across the southern plains, the Mississippi Valley, and eventually the Ohio Valley in the east, and that returning humidity does two things at once. It makes the heat feel several degrees worse than the number on the screen, and it stockpiles exactly the kind of low-level moisture that the next storm system will convert into severe thunderstorms. So when you feel that thick, muggy air settle back in over the next several days, understand that you are feeling the fuel supply for the next round being loaded in real time. Air conditioners across the southern and central United States are about to earn their keep, and the latest temperature guidance from the Climate Prediction Center keeps above normal warmth across the northern tier and the west through the 6 to 10 day window. Then we likely reload. Heading into Monday, June 15th and Tuesday, June 16th, the Weather Prediction Center's extended discussion describes a broad upper trough with embedded pieces of energy across the northwestern and north-central United States, gradually pushing east and reloading over the weekend into next week. If that evolution holds, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota and Iowa move right back toward the crosshairs for organized storms early next week, though the exact timing and strength at that range can still shift, and I will fine-tune those details for you day by day as the guidance comes in, and by the middle of next week, around Wednesday, June 17th, the pattern amplifies even further. The western ridge strengthens, the jet stream rides up and over the top of it, and storm systems begin diving southeast along the northern edge of building heat. That configuration, a hot dome to the southwest and a fast jet running along its rim, is the classic setup for long-lived, fast-moving thunderstorm complexes that can produce damaging winds across hundreds of miles in a single night. Forecasters call them derechos, and the corridor from the Dakotas through Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and into the Ohio Valley is exactly where that risk concentrates in this kind of regime as we move deeper into June. Most channels are not connecting these dots for you, but the repeating nature of this pattern is the single most important forecast signal on the board right now. Why does the atmosphere keep reloading the same gun, week after week, aimed at the same part of the country? The answer is sitting thousands of miles away in the tropical Pacific, where a set of numbers just crossed a threshold that changes the entire summer forecast. But here is where it gets really interesting, and I will show you exactly why in just a moment. Here is the payoff, and it starts with a strip of ocean along the equator that most people have never thought about. Scientists watch a region of the central and eastern tropical Pacific called the Nino 3.4 region. When the surface water there runs warmer than normal for long enough, and when the atmosphere above it responds, we call it El Nino, and that single change ripples through weather patterns on every continent. So where do we stand right now? The Climate Prediction Center currently has an official El Nino watch in effect. Their latest assessment gives an 82% chance that El Nino emerges during the May through July window, which is the window we're standing in right now, and a 96% chance that it is still going strong through next winter. And the ocean is not waiting around for the paperwork. Weekly sea surface temperature readings in the Nino 3.4 region have surged to around 9/10 of 1 degree Celsius above normal, which is comfortably past the threshold used to define El Nino conditions. The International Research Institute at Columbia University runs a forecast plume that blends more than a dozen dynamical and statistical models, and that plume now assigns roughly a 98% probability to El Nino conditions in this very season. The North American Multi-Model Ensemble, which includes the Climate Forecast System version 2, favours El Nino formally locking in by next month and persisting through the winter of 2026 into 2027. Updated just this week, the Climate Prediction Center's own evolution report confirms all of it. Now, one honest caveat, because this channel deals in data, not drama. The strength of this event is still an open question. In the official probability breakdown for the winter peak of the event, the odds are split almost evenly between a moderate, a strong, and a very strong outcome, with no single category carrying much more than a 1 in 4 chance. The strongest El Nino events in history all show deep coupling between the ocean and the atmosphere during the summer months, and we are watching in real time to see whether that coupling takes hold this year. Some private forecasters are already throwing around the phrase Super El Nino. I am not ready to go that far yet, but I will tell you this. The speed of the warming over the past several weeks has been remarkable, and every monthly update so far this year has shifted the odds in one direction only, upward. Let me take 30 seconds and explain what is physically happening out there, because once you understand the mechanism, every seasonal forecast you ever read will make more sense. In a normal year, steady trade winds blow from east to west along the equator, dragging warm surface water toward Asia and pulling cool, deep water up along the coast of South America. During an El Nino, those trade winds weaken, and in some bursts they even reverse. The warm water that was piled up in the western Pacific sloshes back toward the east. The cool upwelling shuts down, and a vast stretch of ocean, thousands of miles long, turns abnormally warm. All of that warm water pumps enormous amounts of heat and moisture into the atmosphere above it, and the atmosphere responds by rearranging thunderstorm activity across the entire tropical Pacific. That rearrangement is the hand that reaches out and bends the jet streams over North America. It is one of the most powerful natural climate levers on the planet, and right now that lever is being pulled. So what does a strengthening El Nino actually do to an American summer? 3 things, and you can already see all 3 of them switching on. First, it energizes the subtropical jet stream, the southern branch of the river of wind that crosses the country. A stronger subtropical jet means more moisture and more storm energy streaming across the southern United States, which favors a wetter, stormier summer from the southern plains across the Gulf Coast states into the southeast. And it is a big reason the southern half of the country keeps seeing rounds of heavy rain. Second, It teams up with the broader Pacific pattern to build that big ridge of high pressure over the western part of the country. The extended model guidance, run after run, keeps building a strong ridge of high pressure over the western United States as we move deeper into June, and the official Weather Prediction Center discussion already highlights heat building across the west this weekend into early next week. That is the heat dome signal, and it is why the deserts and the interior west are forecast to bake while the storm track gets shoved up along the northern tier. Third, and this is the part that matters most for the middle of the country, the main storm track gets pinned along the rim of that western heat dome, running from the northern plains across the upper Midwest toward the Great Lakes. Every few days, another piece of energy comes screaming down that track, hits the warm, humid air spilling north and ignites severe weather. That is exactly why today is severe, Thursday is enhanced, Friday shifts east, and early next week reloads in the very same place. It is not a coincidence. It is one giant connected machine, and El Nino is sitting at the controls. The latest run just came in and it only reinforced this picture. Have you started to feel this shift where you live yet? The heat building out west, or the repeated storms through the middle of the country? Tell me your state and what you're seeing in the comments, because I read every single one and your local reports tell me things the models cannot. So let me translate all of this into what your specific part of the country should expect as summer unfolds, based on the official outlooks and the way El Nino summers have historically behaved. If you are in the west and the southwest, plan for prolonged heat under that building ridge, with the one bright spot being a potential boost to the monsoon moisture later in the season. If you are in the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and the Great Lakes, you are living on the active side of the pattern, with repeated storm systems, beneficial rain, and an elevated risk of organized severe weather and long-lived wind events through at least the middle of the summer. If you are along the Gulf Coast and in the southeast, expect a wetter, stormier lean than usual, with frequent tropical downpours riding that enhanced southern jet, and temperatures that may actually average near or even slightly below normal at times, simply because of all the clouds and rain. And if you're in the northeast, you sit at the end of the storm track conveyor belt, catching the systems that cross the Great Lakes, which means an active, changeable summer rather than one long, stagnant heat wave. So what does this actually mean for your area? It means the summer story is not one story. It is 4 different stories playing out at once, all written by the same ocean. There is one more piece of this summer pattern worth flagging before we move on, and it is good news for some of you. With the storm track running so active across the nation's midsection, the Corn Belt and the upper Midwest are in line for repeated rounds of beneficial rainfall over the next couple of weeks, on top of the severe weather risk. After the dry stretches some of those areas have dealt with, multiple inches of rain through mid-June would be a genuine drought buster for parts of Iowa, Minnesota, and the surrounding states. The same pattern that brings the risk also brings the rain. Keep both in mind. Before we wrap up, there is one more thing you need to know, and this is the part I've been building toward, because everything we just covered comes together in the tropics. As of this morning's 8 o'clock Eastern outlook, the National Hurricane Center is officially watching its first area of interest of the entire 2026 Atlantic hurricane season, and it is not out in the open ocean. It is in the Bay of Campeche, in the far southern Gulf of America. The official language says a broad area of low pressure could form there late this week. The marine forecast discussion adds detail, calling for a trough or weak low to emerge off the Yucatan Peninsula into the Bay of Campeche between Thursday and Friday night, accompanied by numerous showers and thunderstorms, strengthening winds and building seas. Right now the development odds are on the low side, and I want to be straight with you about that. This is not a hurricane. It is not even a depression yet, but it is the first marked area of the Atlantic season. The water underneath it is warm, and if anything in the basin earns a name in the coming weeks, that name will be Arthur, followed by Bertha and Cristobal. So what happens if it does spin up? Steering currents matter more than strength here. A ridge of high pressure is forecast to dominate the Gulf region through the week, and that ridge would most likely nudge any developing system west toward eastern Mexico, rather than letting it run north. But hear me clearly on this. Development or no development, the moisture is coming. A surge of deep tropical moisture is expected to stream north out of that region, raising the threat of heavy downpours and localized flooding for parts of eastern Mexico and potentially the western Gulf Coast, including South Texas, heading into next week. If you live along the western Gulf of America coastline, flooding rain, not wind, is the threat to respect with this first system of the season. Are you on the Gulf Coast right now? Tell me your city in the comments, because I want to hear how the start of this season feels on the ground where you are. Meanwhile, look at the other side of Central America, because the contrast could not be sharper. The Eastern Pacific is wide awake. The National Hurricane Center is actively issuing advisories on Tropical Storm Cristina, located just south of El Salvador, and Cristina is already the third named system of the Eastern Pacific season, following Amanda and Boris on the naming list. 3 named systems this early, while the Atlantic has produced exactly 0, is not random. It is El Nino's signature, written across both basins at the same time. Warmer than normal water in the Eastern Pacific gives storms on that side extra fuel, and the official Pacific outlooks lean clearly toward an active season over there. Mexico's Pacific coast, in particular, needs to treat this season seriously, because El Nino summers historically tilt the odds toward more frequent and stronger systems in exactly that part of the world. Keep an eye on the rainfall side of Cristina as well, because even tropical storms that never threaten the United States directly can matter to the American forecast. Moisture streaming north out of systems near Central America and southern Mexico feeds the subtropical jet we talked about earlier, and that moisture can end up as flooding rain over Mexico, and, at times, as a surge of tropical humidity reaching into Texas and the desert southwest, helping kickstart the summer monsoon. In an El Nino summer, the Eastern Pacific is not a sideshow. It is a moisture engine pointed at North America, and the official seasonal outlook for the Central Pacific even calls for a 70% chance of an above-normal season out toward Hawaii. One basin starves while the other one feasts, and both outcomes trace back to the same warm strip of equatorial ocean. So here is the question everyone watching from the United States actually cares about. What does this El Nino mean for the Atlantic hurricane season, the one that threatens the Gulf of America coast and the East Coast? The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has already given us their answer, and it is one of the more confident seasonal outlooks they have issued in years. Their official forecast calls for a 55% chance of a below-normal Atlantic season, a 35% chance of a near-normal season, and only a 10% chance of an above-normal season, and the strengthening El Nino is the primary reason. The physics behind that are simple and brutal for developing storms. El Nino strengthens the upper-level winds blowing across the Caribbean and the tropical Atlantic, creating wind shear that tilts and tears apart young tropical systems before they can organize. It also tends to make the air over the Atlantic basin more stable and sinking, and right now large portions of the main development region between Africa and the Caribbean are actually running cooler than normal, which starves seedling storms of fuel, shear, stability, and cool water. That is a 3-layer shield over the heart of the Atlantic basin, and as El Nino matures through late summer and fall, that shield typically grows stronger, especially during what is normally the peak of the season from September through November, and there are 2 more suppressing factors sitting over the Atlantic right now that deserve a mention, because they stack on top of the El Nino shield. The first is dust. Large plumes of dry, dusty air have been rolling off the Sahara Desert and out across the tropical Atlantic, and that dry air chokes thunderstorm clusters trying to organize over the open ocean. The second is simple seasonal geography. The band of thunderstorms circling the globe near the equator, the intertropical convergence zone, is still sitting relatively far south for the year, which means the tropical waves rolling off Africa are emerging into an environment that is dry, sheared, and cool. As we move deeper into summer, the dust thins, the thunderstorm band lifts north, and windows for development will open and close, but every one of those windows will have to fight the growing El Nino shear to produce anything. That is why the deep tropics are likely to stay quiet for long stretches, and why the action this season keeps getting squeezed into the warm waters closest to the United States coastline. But here is the part of this story that I need you to carry with you all season long, because this is where below-normal seasons fool people. A quiet basin does not mean a safe coastline. Notice where the water is still warm. While the open tropical Atlantic runs cool, sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of America, the northwestern Caribbean, and the waters around Florida are running near to above normal. That is exactly where homegrown, close-to-land systems are born, the kind that spin up from a stalled front, a stray trough, or a wandering area of low pressure, sometimes with only 2 or 3 days of warning before landfall instead of 2 weeks of watching a wave cross the ocean. And history is blunt about this. Some of the most devastating United States hurricane strikes on record happened during El Nino-influenced or otherwise quiet seasons. because it only takes one storm finding one gap in the shear at the wrong moment. So the playbook for this season is different, not easier. Spend less energy staring at the deep tropics and more energy watching the Western Caribbean, the Bay of Campeche, and the Gulf of America itself, especially during these early season weeks and again whenever the shear relaxes for a few days at a time. That first marked area sitting down there right now, in the second week of the season, is the perfect illustration of exactly how this year is likely to behave. Short range, close to home, and fast developing when it happens. That is the kind of season where staying plugged into daily updates genuinely matters, and that is exactly what we do here. The thread running through all of this, the shear, the ridge, the moisture surges, all of it traces back to the same warming strip of Pacific Ocean we talked about earlier. One signal, one summer, every basin connected. So let's put the whole board together. Severe weather is ongoing today across the northern plains and upper Midwest. Thursday brings an enhanced risk with strong tornadoes, giant hail, and destructive winds possible from Iowa and northern Missouri into Wisconsin. Friday shifts the threat toward the lower Great Lakes and the interior Northeast, and the pattern reloads across the northern tier early next week as heat builds out west. Behind all of it, El Nino is strengthening week by week, with an 82% chance of officially arriving this season and near certainty by winter, reshaping the jet stream, fueling the eastern Pacific, and suppressing the deep Atlantic while leaving the warm Gulf of America as the area to watch closest to home. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, tap the like button so more people can find it, and if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time, because this pattern is going to demand daily updates. Tomorrow morning, the Climate Prediction Center releases its brand new monthly El Nino Diagnostics discussion, the single most important El Nino update of the month, and I will be watching it very closely and breaking down every number the moment it lands. Until then, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which threat concerns you most this summer, the storms, the heat, or the tropics. Stay weather aware, take care of each other, and I will see you in the next one.